Tonight, the man who built his empire with blood will kneel before the woman he once called weak. Damian Vale stood amidst the ruined warehouse, his hands stained with blood, while police sirens blared in the distance. Before him, Serafina, the wife the underworld called the timid deer. But tonight, beneath her spotless ivory-white coat, was an army emerging from the shadows, and Damian finally understood he had never truly known the woman he married. Stay until the end of this story. Like and comment where you're starting from. Let me know how far this story has come. Rain didn't just fall on Blackwater Port that night. It came down like punishment, cold, relentless, hammering the corrugated rooftops of the shipping district until the whole world sounded like a drum roll before an execution. The kind of storm that made men pull their collars up and walk faster. The kind that turned blood into black oil on cracked pavement. Damian Vale stood in the center of Warehouse 17 with his fists still clenched, knuckles split open and dripping. His breath came hard. His shirt clung to his ribs, soaked through from rain and sweat, and something darker he didn't want to name. Around him, shipping crates sat stacked like tombstones, and somewhere far off in the city, federal sirens wailed through the downpour like ghosts screaming his name. He wasn't supposed to be here. This was supposed to be over, but it wasn't over. Not even close. Because across from him, standing in a pool of silver light beneath a shattered skylight, was Serafina, his wife. The woman he married 15 years ago in a chapel overlooking the harbor. The woman who never raised her voice, never complained, never fought back. The woman every man in his organization dismissed as the quiet one. The one who smiled politely at charity galas and kept her hands folded in her lap during business meetings. The one Damian had stopped seeing years ago because she'd become part of the furniture. Safe, predictable, forgettable. Except tonight, she didn't look forgettable. She stood perfectly still in an ivory coat that somehow hadn't picked up a single raindrop. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, her face was carved from stone, and behind her men emerged from the shadows. Not street thugs, not hired muscle, but professionals. Clean boots, tactical gear. Weapons held with the kind of discipline that only came from military training or cartel bloodlines. Damian's heart kicked against his ribs. "Sarah," he said, and his voice cracked like glass. She didn't answer. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, the way a surgeon might examine a tumor before deciding where to cut. "You should have loved me," she said quietly, "before you feared me." Her words hit harder than the fists he'd been throwing 10 minutes ago. Then the shadows moved again. An older man stepped forward, silver-haired, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most men earned in a year. His movements were slow, deliberate, unbothered by the rain or the guns or the wreckage surrounding them. He stopped beside Serafina and placed one hand on her shoulder with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. Damian felt the floor tilt beneath him. He knew that face. Every criminal east of the Mississippi knew that face, even if they'd never seen it in person. It belonged to a ghost, a legend, a name whispered in back rooms and offshore accounts and congressional hearings that never went anywhere. Lucian Castellano, the Invisible King, the man who controlled half the eastern seaboard without ever appearing in public, the man who could erase governments with a phone call, the man whose enemies didn't get arrested or indicted, they simply stopped existing. And he was standing beside Serafina like a father at his daughter's wedding. Damian's mouth went dry. "No," he whispered, but the word came out hollow, because he already knew. He'd known the second he saw her standing there with that expression on her face, the one he'd never seen before, not in 15 years of marriage. Not when he came home late, not when the rumors started, not even when he stopped pretending. Serafina wasn't the scared girl he rescued from a restaurant shooting all those years ago. She was Castellano's daughter, and Damian had just lost everything. 15 years earlier, Damian Vale had been a different man. Not better, just different. He was 32 years old, hungry, and smart enough to know that being smart wasn't enough. Blackwater Port was a city built on rust and salt and bad decisions, and if you wanted to climb, you needed luck, timing, and a willingness to do things other men wouldn't. Damian had all three. He ran security for a mid-tier smuggling operation. Nothing glamorous, just warehouse oversight and payroll enforcement. But he was good at reading people. Good at knowing when to push and when to wait. Good at making himself indispensable. And then one night, everything changed. He was sitting in a Portuguese restaurant in the old harbor district, nursing a whiskey and waiting for a contact who never showed. The place was packed. Families, couples, tourists taking photos of the waterfront through rain-streaked windows. Damian barely noticed them. He was thinking about money, about routes, about the shipment coming in next week that could set him up for a real move. Then the front door exploded inward. Not a knock, not a push, an explosion of splintered wood and broken glass as three men in black tactical gear stormed inside with automatic rifles raised. The first shot shattered the mirror behind the bar. The second tore through a waiter's chest before he could even scream. After that, it was chaos. Tables flipped, people screamed, blood sprayed across white tablecloths. Damian dropped to the floor on instinct, his hand already reaching for the pistol tucked against his spine. Around him, civilians scrambled for cover, trampling over each other in blind panic. And that's when he saw her. A young woman, maybe 25, dark-haired, wide-eyed with terror, crouched beneath a table near the kitchen entrance. She wasn't screaming, wasn't running. She was frozen, staring at the gunmen like a deer caught in headlights. And Damian knew with absolute certainty that she had maybe 10 seconds before one of those rifles swung in her direction. He didn't think. He just moved. He grabbed her by the wrist and yanked her toward the kitchen, dragging her low beneath the spray of bullets chewing through plaster and wood. She stumbled, gasped, but didn't fight him. They hit the kitchen door together and Damian kicked it open, pulling her through just as another burst of gunfire tore through the dining room behind them. Inside the kitchen, it was quieter, darker. The staff had already fled through the back exit. Damian didn't stop. He pulled her through the prep stations, past the walk-in freezer, toward the alley door that he knew, because he always knew, would be unlocked. They burst into the rain together. The alley was narrow, slick with garbage and oil runoff. Damian kept moving, kept pulling her along until they were 3 blocks away, and the sound of sirens finally started rising in the distance. Only then did he let go. The woman collapsed against a brick wall, gasping for air. Her dress was torn. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't hold them still, but she was alive. Damian stood there in the rain, breathing hard, and waited for her to say something. She didn't. She just stared at him with these enormous dark eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and nothing at all. And then she whispered 2 words. "Thank you." That was it. No name, no explanation, no tears. Damian wiped the rain off his face and nodded once. "Get off the street," he said. "They might come back." Then he walked away. He didn't ask her name, didn't ask why she'd been targeted, didn't ask for a phone number or a favor or anything at all because that wasn't the kind of man he was trying to be. Not yet, anyway. 3 weeks later, she found him. He was sitting in a bar near the docks when she walked in wearing a simple black dress and no jewelry. She sat down beside him without asking permission and ordered a glass of red wine she didn't drink. "You saved my life," she said quietly. Damian glanced at her. "Yeah. You didn't ask for anything. Didn't need to." She studied him for a long moment, and Damian got the sense he was being weighed and measured by someone who knew how. "My name is Seraphina," she said. "Damian." She smiled then, small, careful, like she wasn't sure how far it was allowed to go. "I'd like to know you better," she said. And somehow, impossibly, that was how it started. Tut. The courtship was slow, careful, almost old-fashioned. Serafina didn't talk much about her past, and Damian didn't push. She worked as a translator for international shipping firms, spoke 4 languages fluently, kept strange hours, carried herself with a kind of quiet elegance that didn't belong in a port city full of rust and diesel fumes. She was different from the women Damian usually met in his line of work. She didn't ask questions, didn't judge, didn't try to change him. She just listened. And Damian, who spent every day surrounded by men who only respected violence and leverage, found himself talking to her in ways he'd never talked to anyone. About his ambitions, his frustrations, the way the city worked beneath its surface, and the way he planned to own a piece of it someday. Serafina never flinched. She just nodded, sipped her wine, and let him be honest. 6 months later, he asked her to marry him. They were standing on the cliffs overlooking the Atlantic, waves crashing against the rocks below, and Damian didn't have a ring or a plan or anything romantic prepared. He just looked at her and said, "I want you with me, for real, always." Serafina stared out at the water for a long time. "Are you sure?" she asked quietly. "Yeah." She turned to face him, and for just a second, Damian thought he saw something flicker behind her eyes. Something heavy, something complicated. But then it was gone. "Okay," she said. They got married 2 weeks later in a small chapel with no guests and no cameras. Just a priest, 2 witnesses pulled off the street, and a promise Damian meant with everything he had. For a while it was good, better than good. Serafina became his partner in ways he hadn't expected. She was smart, sharper than most of the men he worked with, and she understood the business without needing it explained. She handled logistics, managed contacts, smoothed over disputes with a few quiet words that somehow carried more weight than threats. And Damian's empire grew. Within 3 years, he'd gone from warehouse security to running his own operation. Within 5, he controlled half the smuggling routes through Blackwater Port. Within 10, he owned legitimate businesses, casinos, real estate, luxury hotels overlooking the harbor. He became the man he always wanted to be, powerful, feared, untouchable. And Serafina stood beside him the whole time, elegant and quiet, playing the perfect Mafia wife at every gala and business dinner. Men dismissed her, called her decorative, called her lucky. Damian stopped noticing her at all, because somewhere along the way, success had changed him. Not all at once, not with a single decision, just slowly, imperceptibly, the way rust eats through steel. He started taking mistresses, started spending money like water, started treating his wife like furniture, something valuable he owned but didn't need to maintain. And Serafina never complained. She just smiled politely, kept the house running, and stayed out of his way. Damian convinced himself that meant she didn't care. He was wrong. The affair with Vanessa Laurent started 18 months ago. Vanessa was everything Serafina wasn't. Loud, flashy, dangerous, in all the ways that made Damian's blood run hot. She owned an art gallery in the financial district that laundered money for half the criminal organizations on the East Coast, and she had a laugh that could cut glass and eyes that promised things Damian had forgotten he wanted. The first time they slept together was in a hotel suite overlooking the harbor, and Damian didn't feel guilty. He felt alive. After that, it became a regular thing, twice a week, sometimes more. Vanessa didn't ask for commitment or honesty or anything complicated. She just wanted expensive dinners and expensive gifts, and the thrill of sleeping with a man who could burn the city down if he wanted. Damian gave her all 3. And at home, Serafina said nothing. She cooked dinner. She managed the household staff. She attended his business functions without complaint. She was perfect in every way that didn't matter anymore. Damian started talking about her with his associates. "She's safe," he said once, drunk at a poker game. "Boring, no fire." One of his captains, a man named Torres who'd been with him since the beginning, had given him a strange look. "You sure about that, boss?" Damian had laughed. "Trust me, I know my wife." Torres hadn't said anything else. But looking back now, standing in this warehouse with rain hammering the roof and Lucien Castellano staring at him like a man studying an insect, Damian realized Torres had been trying to warn him. He'd just been too arrogant to listen. But the first sign something was wrong came 3 weeks ago. A shipment disappeared. Not stolen, not intercepted, just gone. 12 containers of electronics and pharmaceuticals that were supposed to arrive at Pier 7 vanished somewhere between international waters and the harbor. No trace, no ransom, no explanation. Damian called his contacts, pulled strings, threatened people. Nothing. Then it happened again. Another shipment. Gone. Then a third. Within 2 weeks, Damian had lost almost $4 million in merchandise, and nobody could tell him why. His captain started looking nervous. His suppliers started asking questions. His bankers started calling with concerns about liquidity. And through it all, Serafina stayed calm. She brought him coffee in the morning. She asked about his day. She didn't flinch when he came home angry and drunk and looking for someone to blame. "It'll turn around," she said quietly. "You always figure it out." Damian had kissed her forehead without thinking and gone back to his office. 3 days later, his bank accounts were frozen. All of them, simultaneously. The call came at 2 in the morning from his private banker, a man who'd never panicked in his life, and his voice was shaking. "I don't know how to explain this," the banker said, "but someone with serious federal authority just locked down every account tied to your operations. I'm talking Treasury Department level. Maybe higher." Damian sat up in bed. "Who?" "I don't know. But Damian, whoever did this has access I've never seen before. This isn't local law enforcement. This is something bigger." The line went dead. Damian tried calling back. The number was disconnected. He stood there in his bedroom, phone in hand, heart hammering, and for the first time in 15 years, he felt something close to fear. Beside him in bed, Serafina slept peacefully, her breathing slow and even. It escalated fast after that. Within 48 hours, 3 of Damian's most trusted captains disappeared. Not arrested, not killed, just gone. Houses empty, phones disconnected, families relocated overnight. His lawyers stopped returning calls. His politicians stopped answering emails. Warehouses he'd owned for a decade were suddenly seized by federal agents in coordinated raids that happened simultaneously across the city. And through it all, nobody could tell him who was behind it. The name kept coming up in whispers, though. Castellano. At first, Damian refused to believe it. Lucien Castellano was a myth, a legend, a name people used to scare each other in backroom negotiations. He didn't involve himself in street-level operations or territorial disputes. He was bigger than that, untouchable. But then Damian started putting the pieces together. The precision of the raids, the speed of the asset seizures, the way his entire network was being dismantled without a single shot fired or a single arrest made. This wasn't law enforcement. This was something else. This was power on a level Damian had never encountered before. And then he went to see Vanessa. Set. The gallery was empty when he arrived. The lights were off. The security cameras were dark. The door was unlocked. Damian walked through the silent rooms filled with abstract paintings and marble sculptures worth more than most people earned in a lifetime, and he felt his stomach tighten with each step. "Vanessa?" No answer. He climbed the stairs to her private apartment above the gallery. The door was open. Inside, every piece of furniture was gone. Every painting, every personal item. The apartment had been stripped clean, professionally, like a crime scene sanitized by experts. No goodbye note, no explanation, just emptiness. Damian stood there in the hollow space and felt something crack inside his chest. His phone buzzed. A voicemail from an unknown number. He played it with shaking hands. The voice that came through was calm, female, and utterly devoid of emotion. "You were collateral damage, Miss Laurent. Leave the city and live quietly. This mercy will not be offered twice." The recording ended. Damian played it again and again, and then he heard it. Beneath the words, beneath the digital compression, the faintest hint of an accent he recognized. Portuguese. The same accent Serafina sometimes slipped into when she was tired or distracted. Damian's phone slipped from his hand and hit the floor. Passig. He drove home through the rain like a man possessed. The mansion sat on the cliffs overlooking the Atlantic, surrounded by iron gates and security cameras and armed guards who'd been with him for years. Damian barely saw them as he stormed through the front entrance, his clothes soaked, his hands shaking. The house was dark except for the dining room. Candlelight flickered against the walls. Serafina sat at the far end of the long table, a glass of red wine in front of her, still untouched. She was wearing a simple black dress. Her hair was down. She looked exactly the way she'd looked on their wedding night. Beautiful, composed, unreachable. "You're home early?" she said quietly. Damian stopped in the doorway. His heart was hammering so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. "What did you do?" he whispered. Serafina tilted her head slightly, the way she always did when she was thinking. "I protected myself," she said. "Vanessa's gone." "I know." "My accounts are frozen." "I know." "My captain's disappeared." "I know." Damian took a step forward. "Who are you?" Serafina looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood, moved to the sideboard, and poured herself another glass of wine with steady hands. "I'm the woman you married 15 years ago," she said. "The woman you saved? The woman you promised to protect?" She turned to face him. "I'm also the daughter of Lucian Castellano, and for 15 years I chose to be your wife instead of his legacy." The room tilted. Damian grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself. "You're lying." "I'm not. That's impossible. It's not. You never—" "I never told you," Serafina interrupted quietly, "because I wanted you to love me for who I was. Not who I came from, not what I could give you, just me." Her voice didn't crack, didn't waver. "And for a while you did." Damian felt like he was drowning. "Then you forgot," Serafina continued. "You stopped seeing me. You started treating me like furniture, like something you owned but didn't need to maintain." She took a sip of wine. "And when you brought her into our lives, when you humiliated me in front of the entire city, I realized something." "What?" "That you never loved me at all. You loved the idea of me. The quiet girl, the safe choice, the woman who would never challenge you." Her eyes were black in the candlelight. "But I was never that woman, Damian. I was just pretending because I thought you deserved the chance to be better." "Sarah, don't." Her voice cut like a blade. "Tomorrow night, you'll meet my father. He'll decide what happens next. But I want you to understand something before that." Damian couldn't breathe. "You called me weak," Serafina said softly. "You called me boring. You said I had no fire." She set down her wine glass. "That wasn't weakness, Damian. That was mercy. I chose not to burn you because I still believed you could change." "I can change," Damian said desperately. "I will." "It's too late." And the way she said it, flat, final, absolute, made Damian understand that this wasn't a negotiation. This was a sentencing. The next evening, a black car arrived at the mansion. No warning, no explanation, just two men in dark suits who stood at the front door and waited. Damian didn't fight, didn't run. He got in the car and let them take him. They drove north through the rain, past the harbor, past the industrial districts, into the old financial quarter where historic buildings stood like gravestones. The car stopped in front of an abandoned bank, marble columns, boarded windows, a place that had once been important and now just existed. The men opened the door. Damian stepped out into the rain. Inside the bank was hollow. Empty teller stations, dust-covered floors, and at the far end of the main hall, beneath a chandelier that somehow still worked, sat a long wooden table. Lucien Castellano sat at the head of it. He looked exactly like his photos. Silver-haired, elegant, radiating the kind of calm that only came from absolute power. He wore a charcoal suit. His hands were folded on the table. His expression revealed nothing. Serafina stood beside him, not sitting, standing, like a queen beside her king. Damian walked forward slowly, and with each step he felt the weight of his entire life pressing down on his shoulders. When he reached the table, Lucian gestured to a chair. "Sit." Damian sat. Nobody spoke for a long time. Then Lucian leaned forward slightly. "You humiliated my daughter," he said. His voice was quiet, conversational. "You mistook her devotion for weakness. You betrayed her trust. You made her a joke in the city she protected you in. I'm not finished." Damian's mouth snapped shut. "Men like you," Lucian continued, "always think power means control, possession. You think if someone doesn't fight back, it means they're weak. You never consider the possibility that they're simply choosing not to destroy you." He paused. "My daughter chose not to destroy you for 15 years. She loved you. She protected your empire. She covered your mistakes, and you repaid her with humiliation." Damian couldn't speak. "So now," Lucian said quietly, "I will teach you something about power." He nodded once. The men behind Damian moved forward, and for a second he thought they were going to kill him right there. Instead, they placed a folder on the table. Damian opened it with shaking hands. Inside were documents, asset transfers, deed transfers, account closures. Everything he owned, every warehouse, every route, every business, had been transferred out of his name. Some to shell corporations, some to Castellano holding companies, some directly to Serafina. Damian stared at the papers and felt his entire reality collapse. "You're done," Lucian said simply. "Effective immediately, you have no criminal assets, no territory, no organization. You'll be relocated to a small house outside the city where you'll live under quiet surveillance for the rest of your life." "You're not going to kill me?" "No." "Why?" Lucian glanced at Serafina. She looked at Damian with an expression he couldn't read. "Because," Lucian said quietly, "the woman you betrayed is the only reason you're breathing. Every breath you take from this moment forward belongs to her. Remember that." Damian turned to Serafina. Tears burned in his eyes. "I loved you," he whispered. She looked at him for a long time. "I know," she said softly. "But you stopped protecting what you loved, and that's the only thing that mattered." But the car took him away that night. No goodbyes, no final words, just a silent ride through the rain to a small coastal house with a lemon tree in the backyard and bars on the windows that looked like decoration but weren't. Damian sat on the porch that first night and stared out at the Atlantic crashing against the rocks below. He'd lost everything, his empire, his power, his wife. And somehow, the thing that hurt most wasn't the loss. It was the realization that he'd destroyed the only person who ever truly loved him, not because she was weak, but because he'd been too blind to see her strength until it was pointed directly at his throat. The first month in the coastal house felt like drowning in slow motion. Damian woke every morning to the sound of gulls screaming over the Atlantic and the distant crash of waves against black rocks. The house was small. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with chipped tiles, a living room that smelled like salt and old wood. The lemon tree in the backyard had grown wild, branches scraping against the bedroom window whenever the wind picked up. There were no guards he could see, no cameras visible, but Damian knew they were there, watching, waiting for him to do something stupid. He didn't. He just sat on the back porch and stared at the water until the light died and his hands stopped shaking. The lawyers came once. 2 men in expensive suits who sat across from him at the kitchen table and explained very carefully that everything he'd built no longer existed under his name. The casinos had been sold, the warehouses reassigned, the offshore accounts redistributed. Even the mansion on the cliffs, the one he'd bought for Serafina as an anniversary gift, had been transferred into her name years ago, long before he'd ever suspected anything was wrong. "How long?" Damian had asked. The lawyers exchanged glances. "How long what? How long was she planning this?" They didn't answer. They just slid the papers across the table for him to sign and left without shaking his hand. After that, silence. No calls. No visits. No messages from anyone in his old life. It was like he'd been erased. For the first 2 weeks, Damian barely ate. He moved through the house like a ghost, opening cabinets he didn't remember stocking, staring at walls he didn't remember painting. At night, he lay awake and replayed every moment of his marriage in his head, looking for the cracks, the signs, the moments when Serafina had been pretending. He found nothing. Or maybe he found everything, and he'd just been too arrogant to see it. By the 3rd week, the anger started, not the explosive kind. The slow-burning kind that sat in his chest like hot coal and made his jaw ache from clenching. He started pacing the house at night, fists balled, imagining conversations he'd never have, confrontations that would never happen, apologies that wouldn't matter. He wanted to scream at her. He wanted to beg her. He wanted to grab her by the shoulders and make her look at him the way she used to, back when her eyes still held something soft. But Serafina was gone. And the only thing left was the woman who'd stood beside Lucian Castellano in that abandoned bank, cold and untouchable, watching Damian's world collapse without blinking. By the 4th week, Damian started writing letters. He didn't know why. There was no guarantee she'd read them, no guarantee they'd even reach her. But he sat at the kitchen table every night with a pen and paper and tried to put 15 years of regret into words that didn't sound pathetic. "Sarah, I know you won't believe me. I know I don't deserve the chance to explain, but I need you to understand that I didn't stop loving you. I just stopped seeing you, and that might be worse. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if you want me to try, but if there's any part of you that still remembers the man I used to be, the one who pulled you out of that restaurant without asking for anything, please let me know you're okay. That's all I need. Just that. D." He mailed it to the mansion address. No response. He wrote another. Sarah, I keep thinking about the night we got married. You asked me if I was sure, and I said yes without hesitating. I meant it. I still mean it. But I know that doesn't matter now. I know I destroyed something I'll never get back. I just need you to know that if I could go back, if I could undo every stupid decision I made after we stopped being us, I would. I'd burn everything down just to have one more morning where you brought me coffee and smiled like I was still worth it. I'm sorry doesn't cover it, but it's all I have. D. Still nothing. By the 6th week, Damian stopped expecting replies. He just kept writing because it was the only thing that felt real. Meanwhile, in Blackwater Port, Serafina was learning how to rule. She'd spent 15 years in the background, translating, coordinating, smoothing over Damian's mistakes with quiet efficiency. But she'd never stood in front, never made the decisions, never been the one men looked at when they needed direction. Now she was. The transition happened faster than anyone expected. Within days of Damian's exile, Lucien began introducing her to captains, suppliers, and politicians who'd spent decades working in shadows. Men who'd never taken orders from a woman. Men who'd built their empires on violence and intimidation and the kind of loyalty that only came from fear. Serafina didn't try to be like them. She was quieter, calmer. She didn't raise her voice or make threats or slam her fists on tables. She just looked at people until they understood. The first test came during a sit-down with a weapons supplier named Gregor Voss, a Ukrainian arms dealer who'd been moving illegal firearms through Blackwater Port for 20 years. He sat across from Serafina in a private room above one of the harbor casinos, his thick arms folded across his chest, a sneer playing at the corner of his mouth. "You're Castellano's daughter," Voss said in heavily accented English. "I heard stories. But you don't look like much." Serafina didn't blink. "What do I look like, she asked. Voss shrugged. "Like someone's wife." The room went still. Lucien sat beside Serafina, silent, watching. Serafina leaned forward slightly. "I was someone's wife," she said quietly, "and for 15 years I protected his operation without him ever knowing. I cleaned up his messes, I redirected federal investigations, I negotiated with cartels and triads and syndicates while he slept with women who didn't matter." Her voice didn't rise, didn't crack. "So if you think being a wife makes me weak, Mr. Voss, you're welcome to test that theory." Voss stared at her. Then he laughed. A short, barking sound. "I like you," he said. "You got steel." "I have my father's steel," Serafina corrected, "and his patience. Which means if you ever disrespect me again in a room full of my people, you won't leave that room." Voss stopped laughing. He studied her face for a long moment, and whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. "Understood." "Good." Serafina leaned back. "Now, let's talk about your last shipment, the one that arrived 3 containers short." Voss's expression shifted. "That wasn't—" "I know it wasn't your fault," Serafina interrupted. "The containers were intercepted by a rival crew operating out of Baltimore. I've already handled it, but moving forward, any shipment that comes through my port gets verified by my people before it touches your warehouses. Non-negotiable." Voss opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Lucien. Lucien said nothing. "Fine," Voss muttered. Serafina stood, smoothed her dress, and walked out without another word. Behind her she heard Voss exhale slowly. "Your daughter," he said to Lucien, "is terrifying." "Yes," Lucien replied, "she is." But power came with complications. The biggest one arrived 3 weeks after Damian's exile, in the form of Marcus Reeve. Reeve was one of Damian's former captains, a man who'd climbed the ranks through loyalty and brutality in equal measure. He was broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, and smart enough to know when the wind was changing. When Damian fell, Reeve had been one of the first to pivot, offering his services to Castellano's organization without hesitation. Lucien had accepted, but Serafina didn't trust him. She was sitting in her office, a converted penthouse suite overlooking the harbor, when Reeve arrived unannounced. He knocked twice, didn't wait for permission, and walked in like he owned the place. "We need to talk," Reeve said. Serafina looked up from the financial report spread across her desk. About? Damian. Her expression didn't change. He's no longer your concern. He's everyone's concern. Reeve moved closer, his boots heavy on the hardwood floor. Word's getting around that you let him live. Some of the older crews are asking questions. What kind of questions? The kind that wonder if you're too soft to finish what you started. Serafina set down her pen very carefully. Is that what you think, Marcus? Reeve hesitated. I think leaving him alive was a mistake. He's got connections, loyalists, men who'd follow him into hell if he asked, and right now he's sitting in that house planning his comeback. He's not. How do you know? Because I know my husband. The word hung in the air like smoke. Reeve's jaw tightened. You mean your ex-husband? We're still married, Serafina said quietly. Legally, technically, on paper. I haven't signed anything to change that. Why not? Because I'm not done with him yet. Reeve stared at her. You're playing a dangerous game. I'm playing the only game that matters. Serafina leaned back in her chair. Damian isn't planning a comeback, Marcus. He's drowning. And when he finally stops thrashing, I'll decide if he gets pulled out or left under. And if he does come back, he won't. But if he does... Serafina's eyes went cold. Then I'll bury him myself. Reeve studied her for a long moment, then nodded once and left without another word. After he was gone, Serafina sat alone in the silence and tried not to think about the stack of unopened letters sitting in the locked drawer of her desk. Damian's handwriting, Damian's words, Damian's desperation bleeding through every line. She hadn't read them, couldn't. Because the moment she did, she knew she'd start remembering him as the man who saved her, instead of the man who destroyed her. And she couldn't afford that. Not yet. Back in the coastal house, Damian's isolation was starting to crack him open in ways he didn't expect. Without the Empire, without the noise, without the constant motion of deals and threats and power plays, there was nothing left to distract him from the truth. He'd been a monster. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind that burned cities or murdered innocents. Just the quiet kind. The kind that took someone's love and slowly, methodically crushed it until there was nothing left but ashes and obligation. And Serafina had let him. For 15 years, she'd watched him become that man, and she'd never said a word. That's what haunted Damian most. Not her revenge, not her power, not even the fact that she'd been Castellano's daughter all along. It was the silence. The years of silence while she waited for him to be better. And he never was. One morning, almost 2 months into his exile, Damian was sitting on the back porch when an old woman appeared at the edge of his property. She was small, gray-haired, wearing a floral dress that looked 50 years out of date. She carried a basket of lemons. "You're the new tenant," she called out. Damian looked up, startled. He hadn't spoken to another human being in weeks. "Yeah, I'm Mrs. Oakes. I live 3 houses down. I own the bakery on Shoreline Road." She gestured toward the lemon tree. "That's my tree, technically. Grew over the property line years ago. I usually come by to pick the fruit, but I haven't seen anyone here in ages." Damian stood slowly. "You can take them." "Oh, I will," Mrs. Oakes smiled. "But I figured I'd introduce myself first. Are you handy?" "What?" "Handy. You know, lifting things, fixing things. I've got flour sacks that need moving, and my back isn't what it used to be." Damian blinked. "You want me to work for you?" "If you're not busy." She looked around at the empty porch, the untouched yard. "Doesn't look like you're busy." For the first time in months, Damian almost laughed. "What's the pay?" "Fresh bread, coffee, maybe a sandwich if you do good work." Mrs. Oakes tilted her head. "Fair?" Damian didn't know what to say. He'd run an empire worth hundreds of millions. He'd controlled politicians, judges, and entire criminal networks. And now he was being offered bread in exchange for manual labor by a woman who probably didn't even know his name. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Fair." Mrs. Oakes nodded, picked a dozen lemons off the tree, and walked away humming to herself. The next morning, Damian showed up at the bakery at dawn. Chotik. The work was hard, mindless, exhausting in ways that had nothing to do with danger or strategy. Damian spent his days lifting 100-pound flour sacks, scrubbing industrial ovens, and hauling trash to the dumpsters behind the building. Mrs. Oakes didn't talk much. She just pointed at things that needed doing and expected them done. It was the most honest work Damian had ever done. At the end of each shift, she handed him a paper bag filled with bread, still warm, wrapped in wax paper, and sometimes a thermos of coffee. "See you tomorrow," she'd say. And Damian would walk home along the shoreline, eating bread that tasted better than anything he'd ever had in a five-star restaurant, and try to remember the last time his life had felt this simple. He couldn't. One afternoon, almost 3 months into his exile, Mrs. Oakes asked him a question while he was sweeping the floors. "You in trouble with someone?" Damian stopped sweeping. "Why do you ask?" "Because you've got that look." She wiped flour off her hands with a dish towel. "I've seen it before. Men who show up in this town trying to disappear. Usually they're running from the law or a wife or themselves." She looked at him steadily. "Which one are you?" Damian leaned on the broom. "All three." Mrs. Oakes nodded like that made sense. "Well," she said, "whatever you did, you're paying for it now, so you might as well do it with some dignity." "How do I do that?" "By not feeling sorry for yourself." She turned back to the dough she was kneading. "Self-pity's a poison, son. You drink enough of it, and it'll kill you slower than bullets." Damian stared at her back. "Did someone tell you to say that?" "No." Mrs. Oakes glanced over her shoulder. "But whoever you're writing those letters to, maybe try saying something she'd actually want to hear, instead of just apologizing over and over." Damian's chest tightened. "You've been reading my mail?" "It's a small town. The postman talks." She shrugged. "Besides, I don't need to read them to know what they say. Men like you all write the same letter." "What letter is that?" "The one where you explain how sorry you are without actually changing anything." Mrs. Oakes shaped the dough into a round loaf. "If you really want forgiveness, you've got to become someone worth forgiving. Not just say you're sorry for being who you were." She slid the loaf into the oven and closed the door. Damian stood there holding the broom, and for the first time since the warehouse, he felt something crack open inside his chest. Not regret. Understanding. That night, Damian wrote a different letter. "Sarah, I'm not going to apologize again. You've heard it enough, and I know it doesn't matter. Instead, I want to tell you what I'm doing. I work at a bakery now. I lift flour sacks for an old woman who pays me in bread. I wake up at dawn. I go to bed exhausted. I haven't touched alcohol in 2 months. I haven't made a single deal or threat or power play. I'm nobody. And it's the first time in my life I've felt like somebody real. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I don't know if you should. But I'm not asking for that anymore. I'm just telling you that I'm trying to become the man you thought you married. Even if it's too late. Even if you never see it. D." He mailed it the next morning, and for the first time, he didn't wait for a response. 3 weeks later, Serafina finally opened the drawer. She was alone in her office, late at night, the city lights glittering across the harbor below. The stack of letters sat there like evidence of a crime she hadn't committed but couldn't escape. She picked up the most recent one, read it slowly, then read it again. Her hands didn't shake. Her expression didn't change. But something inside her chest shifted, just slightly. And for the first time since that night in the warehouse, she let herself remember what Damian's voice used to sound like when he meant the things he said. She set the letter down, picked up her phone, dialed a number she hadn't called in months. Lucienne answered on the second ring. "Serafina." "I need to see him," she said quietly. There was a long pause. "Are you sure?" "No." Another pause. "When?" "Tomorrow." Lucienne didn't argue. He never did. "I'll arrange it." The line went dead. Serafina sat in the silence for a long time, staring at the letters spread across her desk, and wondered if mercy was the same thing as weakness, or if maybe, just maybe, it was the hardest kind of strength. The next afternoon, a black car arrived at the coastal house. Damian was in the backyard pulling weeds when he heard the engine. He stood slowly, dirt on his hands, sweat on his forehead, and watched as 2 men in dark suits stepped out. His heart kicked against his ribs. "She wants to see you," one of them said. Damian didn't ask who. He just wiped his hands on his jeans, grabbed his jacket, and followed them to the car. The drive back to Blackwater Port felt like moving through a dream. The city rose up around him. Familiar streets, familiar buildings, familiar faces that didn't recognize him anymore. The car stopped in front of the harbor penthouse. Damian stepped out. The elevator took him to the top floor. The doors opened into Seraphina's office. She stood by the window, silhouetted against the dying light, wearing a black dress that made her look like she belonged in a different world than the one Damian now inhabited. She didn't turn around when he entered. "Close the door," she said quietly. Damian closed it. They stood there in silence for what felt like hours. Then Seraphina finally turned to face him, and Damian saw it immediately. The thing he'd been too blind to see for 15 years. She was tired, not physically, but in the way that people get tired when they've been holding themselves together for too long, and the seams are starting to come apart. "You look different," she said. "So do you." Seraphina's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "I read your letters." Damian's throat tightened. "All of them?" "Most of them." She moved away from the window, closer to him, and Damian caught the scent of her perfume, the same one she'd worn since their wedding. "You were right about something." "What?" "You're nobody now." Her eyes were dark, unreadable. "And somehow, that makes you more real than you ever were when you had everything." Damian didn't know what to say. Seraphina stopped 3 feet away from him. "I didn't bring you here to forgive you," she said. "I brought you here because I need to know if the man I'm reading in those letters is real, or if it's just another version of you trying to survive. It's real. Prove it." "How?" Seraphina reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a single document. Divorce papers. She set them on the desk between them. "Sign these," she said quietly. "Walk away. Take the house. Take the money I've set aside for you. Start over somewhere else with no ties to me or my father or this city." Damian stared at the papers. His hand moved toward the pen, then stopped. "What if I don't?" he asked. Seraphina's expression didn't change. "Then you stay in that house. You keep working at that bakery. You keep writing letters I may or may not read. And you accept that I might never forgive you." "Why would I choose that?" "Because," Seraphina said softly, "choosing to stay means you're not trying to escape consequences anymore. It means you're willing to live in the aftermath of what you destroyed, even if it hurts, even if you get nothing." Damian looked at her, really looked at her, and he understood what she was asking. This wasn't a test. This was the choice that would define everything that came next. He could sign the papers, take the money, disappear into a new life where nobody knew his name or his mistakes. Or he could stay and face every single day knowing that the woman he loved was close enough to see but might never let him touch her again. Damian picked up the pen. Seraphina's breath caught, just slightly. Then Damian set the pen back down. "I'm not signing," he said quietly. "Why?" "Because running away is what got me here in the first place." His voice cracked. "I ran from commitment. I ran from honesty. I ran from you every time things got hard. And I'm done running, Sarah. Even if staying means I spend the rest of my life proving something I'll never be able to prove." Seraphina stared at him, and for the first time since that night in the warehouse, her eyes filled with something that wasn't coldness. It was pain, raw, unfiltered, the kind she'd been holding back for 15 years. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she whispered. "I know. I don't know if I even want to. I know." "Then why are you doing this?" Damian took a step closer. "Because you deserve to know that someone chose you. Not your power, not your legacy, not your father's empire. Just you." His voice broke. "And I know I'm too late. I know I already destroyed that. But if there's even the smallest chance that someday you'll look at me and see something worth saving..." He couldn't finish. Seraphina turned away, her shoulders shaking. And Damian realized she was crying, not loudly, not dramatically, just silently, the way someone cries when they've been broken so thoroughly they forgot how to make sound. He wanted to reach for her. He didn't. Instead, he just stood there and let her feel everything he'd spent 15 years making her bury. Finally, Seraphina wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and turned to face him again. Her mascara was smudged, her composure shattered, and somehow she looked more like the girl he'd saved in that restaurant than she had in years. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said, her voice thick. "I know, but I'm not ready to let you go either." Damian's heart stopped. Serafina picked up the divorce papers and tore them in half. "So here's what's going to happen," she said quietly. "You're going to go back to that house. You're going to keep working, keep writing, keep becoming whoever it is you're trying to be. And I'm going to keep running this empire. And maybe, in a year or 5 years or 10 years, we'll figure out if there's anything left worth saving between us." "And if there isn't?" Serafina looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Then at least we'll know we tried." Damian nodded, and without another word he walked toward the door. His hand was on the handle when Serafina spoke again. "Damian." He turned. She was still standing by the desk, tears drying on her cheeks, looking fragile and unbreakable all at once. "The man who saved me that night," she said softly. "I've been waiting 15 years for him to come back." "What if he can't?" Serafina's lips curved into something that might have been a smile in another life. "Then I guess we'll both have to become different people." Damian held her gaze for one more second. Then he left. And as the elevator carried him back down to street level, he realized something that made his chest ache. For the first time since the warehouse, he had hope. Not because Serafina had forgiven him, but because she'd given him the one thing he never thought he'd get. A chance to prove that becoming better wasn't just words on paper. It was a choice you made every single day, even when nobody was watching, especially then. But outside the penthouse, in a car parked 3 blocks away, Marcus Reeves sat behind the wheel with a phone pressed to his ear. "He didn't sign," Reeves said quietly. On the other end of the line, a voice responded. Cold, calculated, familiar. "Good. What do you want me to do?" There was a pause. "Let him think he has a chance," the voice said. "Let them both think there's still something to save. And when they're vulnerable..." The line went dead. Reeves stared at the phone. Then he started the engine and drove away into the Blackwater night. And somewhere in the city's underbelly, pieces were already moving on a board neither Damian nor Serafina could see. Because the past wasn't done with them yet, and the people they destroyed on their way to power were finally ready to collect. The call came at 3 in the morning. Damian was awake when his phone buzzed. He'd been awake most nights lately, lying in the dark, listening to the ocean, and trying not to think about the look on Serafina's face when she'd torn those divorce papers in half. The phone sat on the nightstand, silent for months, and now it was lighting up with a number he didn't recognize. He answered without thinking. "Yeah," heavy breathing on the other end. Then a voice, male, panicked, familiar in a way that made Damian's stomach drop. "Boss, it's Torres." Damian sat up fast, his heart already hammering. Torres, one of his oldest captains, the man who'd tried to warn him about Serafina all those months ago. "Torres, what? They're coming for her." The words hit like a fist to the throat. "What?" "Serafina, there's a hit, tonight, I just found out." Torres was breathing hard like he'd been running. "I tried calling her people, but nobody's answering. They've been compromised, all of them." Damian was already moving, pulling on jeans, searching for his keys. "Who ordered it?" "I don't know, but it's big. Professional. The kind of crew that doesn't miss." Torres paused. "Boss, I know you're out. I know you're supposed to stay away. But if you don't move right now, she's dead by sunrise." The line went dead. Damian stood there in the dark, phone in hand, every muscle in his body locked tight. He'd been told to stay away, to keep his distance, to let Serafina handle her own empire while he rebuilt himself into something worth forgiving. But if she died tonight, none of that mattered. He grabbed his jacket and ran. The drive back to Blackwater Port took 40 minutes at illegal speeds. Damian's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, his mind racing through scenarios, trying to piece together what Torres had said. A hit, professional, compromised security, which meant someone inside Castellano's organization had turned. The question was who? Damian's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He answered. "Don't go to the penthouse." A different voice this time. Female, cold, precise. Damian didn't recognize it, but the authority in it made him slow the car. "Who is this?" Someone who wants Serafina alive. A pause. They're waiting for you at the penthouse. It's a trap. She's not there. Where is she? The old Castellano estate, north side. She went there to meet with someone she thought she could trust. Who? The voice hesitated. Marcus Reeve. Damian's blood turned to ice. Reeve, the captain who'd been so eager to prove his loyalty, the one who'd questioned whether Serafina was too soft, the one who'd disappeared from sight for the past month, while everyone assumed he was handling operations in the Southern Territories. Why would she meet with him? Because he told her he had information about a conspiracy inside her father's old network. He told her it couldn't wait. He told her to come alone. Damian's throat tightened. And she believed him. She did. Why are you telling me this? The voice went quiet for a moment. Because you're the only person in this city who has nothing to gain from her death, the woman said. Everyone else is positioning for power. You're just trying to survive. That makes you the only one she can trust right now, even if she doesn't know it yet. Who are you? It doesn't matter. The line started to crackle. The estate is 15 minutes north. If you're not there in 10, she's gone. The call ended. Damian stared at the road ahead, his mind working through possibilities, and came to one terrifying conclusion. Someone had been playing them both from the beginning, and now they were about to finish the game. He pressed the accelerator to the floor. The Castellano estate sat on 20 acres of forested land overlooking the cliffs. It was the house Lucien had built 40 years ago, back when he was just starting to consolidate power, and it had been abandoned since his death. The gates were rusted, the driveway was overgrown. The main house loomed in the darkness like a monument to something that used to matter. Damian parked half a mile away and approached on foot. No lights, no guards, no sign of life. But there were fresh tire tracks in the gravel. Someone was here. Damian moved quietly through the trees, his breath visible in the cold air, and circled around to the back of the estate. Through a shattered window, he could see candlelight flickering in what used to be the main study. He climbed through the window. Inside, the house smelled like rot and salt air. Furniture sat covered in dust sheets. Portraits of Lucien's ancestors hung crooked on the walls. Damian moved toward the study, his footsteps silent on warped floorboards, and stopped just outside the doorway. Voices. He pressed himself against the wall and listened. You said you had proof, Serafina's voice, calm, controlled, but with an edge underneath. So where is it? Patience, Marcus Reeve. This kind of information doesn't come easy. People died getting it to me. Then show me. A pause. Tell me something first, Reeve said. When you took over from Damian, did you ever ask yourself why it was so easy? Seraphina didn't answer right away. It wasn't easy, wasn't it? Reeve's voice took on a strange quality, something almost amused. You snapped your fingers and his entire empire collapsed overnight. Banks froze. Shipments vanished. Captains disappeared, like someone had been planning it for years. My father planned it. Did he? Silence. Damian's pulse hammered in his ears. What are you saying? Seraphina asked quietly. I'm saying your father was old, sick. He hadn't made a strategic move in 5 years before you called him. So how did he dismantle Damian's operation so perfectly in 48 hours? He had resources. He had you. Reeve's voice sharpened. You were the one coordinating everything. You were the one redirecting shipments. You were the one who knew exactly which accounts to freeze and which captains to turn. Your father just gave you permission. Another pause. So, Reeve said slowly. That means you've been running Castellano's empire for years. Not him. You. While everyone thought you were just Damian's quiet little wife, you were actually the one pulling strings behind the scenes. Get to the point, Marcus. The point is this. Reeve's tone went cold. If you've been running things all along, then Lucien's death wasn't natural. It was convenient. He died 3 months after you took power publicly. No investigation, no autopsy, just a quiet funeral and a smooth transition. Seraphina's voice dropped to something dangerous. You're accusing me of killing my father. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just connecting dots. Reeve paused. But other people are connecting them too, and some of those people think you're a threat that needs to be eliminated before you consolidate too much power. Which people? The people who sent me here to find out if you're worth keeping alive. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Damian's hand moved instinctively toward his waistband, but he had no weapon. Nothing. He'd left the house too fast. Inside the study, Serafina spoke with a voice like glass. You're working for someone. Everyone works for someone. Who? Reeve laughed, short, bitter. You really don't know, do you? He sounded almost pitying. You think you dismantled Damian's empire all by yourself. You think your father handed you the keys to his kingdom because he loved you. But the truth is, Seraphina, you've been a puppet the entire time. And the person holding your strings is the same person who's been holding them since the day you married Damian. That's impossible, is it? Reeve's voice moved closer. Think about it. Who convinced Damian to marry you in the first place? Who made sure you were always in the right place at the right time? Who fed you information about his affairs, his weaknesses, his vulnerabilities? Serafina didn't answer. You didn't figure it out on your own, Reeve said softly. Someone wanted you to figure it out. Someone wanted you angry enough to call your father. Someone wanted Damian destroyed and you in power. And now that same someone has decided you've outlived your usefulness. Who? The silence stretched. Then a third voice spoke from the shadows. Calm, elegant, and utterly familiar. Me. Damian's heart stopped. He knew that voice. Vanessa Laurent stepped into the candlelight. Damian's former mistress. The art dealer. The woman who'd disappeared without a trace the night everything fell apart. She looked exactly the same. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, dressed in expensive clothes that didn't belong in a ruined estate. But there was something different about her now, something colder, something that had always been there beneath the surface and Damian had been too blind to see. Serafina stared at her. You, Vanessa smiled. Hello, Serafina. You're supposed to be gone. I was, for a while. Vanessa moved closer, her heels clicking on old wood. But I never really left. I've been watching, waiting, making sure everything fell into place exactly the way I planned. Serafina's face was unreadable, but Damian could hear the tension in her voice. You planned this. All of it. Vanessa's smile widened. The affair was never about Damian. It was about you. I needed him distracted, arrogant, so convinced of his own power that he'd stop paying attention to the one person who actually mattered. She tilted her head. You. Why? Because 15 years ago, your father destroyed my family. Vanessa's voice went flat. He killed my brother, took our territory, erased us from every record like we never existed. And I've spent every year since then planning how to return the favor. The pieces started falling into place in Damian's mind, slowly, horribly. You used me, Serafina said quietly. I used everyone. Vanessa gestured toward Reeve. Marcus has been feeding me information since the day Damian fell. Every move you made, every decision, every moment of weakness. She paused. And now I have enough leverage to take everything Lucian built and burn it to ash. Starting with you. Serafina's expression didn't change. You won't leave this house alive. Vanessa laughed. Light, musical, wrong. You think you still have protection? Serafina, half your security team answers to me now. The other half won't reach you in time. And your father's old allies? She shrugged. They've been waiting for an excuse to replace you with someone more manageable. Then why tell me all this? Because I wanted you to know. Vanessa's eyes glittered in the candlelight. I wanted you to understand that everything you thought you built was actually just a cage I designed. Your power, your revenge, your reconciliation with Damian. She leaned closer. I've been in control the entire time, and now I'm taking my throne back. Reeve pulled a gun from his jacket. Serafina didn't move, and Damian, standing outside the door with no weapon and no plan, made a decision that would either save her or kill them both. He stepped into the doorway. Hello, Vanessa. 3 heads turned toward him. Reeve's gun swung up immediately. Vanessa's eyes widened, shut, just slightly. And for the first time since Damian had known her, she looked genuinely surprised. Damian, her voice was carefully controlled. I wondered if you'd show up. Disappointed? Curious? Vanessa studied him. You were supposed to stay in your little house, Play the reformed man. Write your pathetic letters. Stay out of the way. Yeah, well, Damian stepped fully into the room, his hands visible, empty. I was never good at following orders. Reeve kept the gun trained on him. Boss, don't move. I'm not your boss anymore, Marcus. Damian didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on Vanessa. But I'm guessing you already knew that. How long have you been working for her? Reeve's jaw tightened. Since the beginning. Since before Damian even met me, Vanessa corrected. Marcus has been very useful, feeding me information, planting doubts, making sure Damian's paranoia grew just enough to blind him to what was really happening. Damian felt something cold settle in his chest. The restaurant shooting, he said slowly. 15 years ago, the one where I saved Seraphina. Vanessa's smile returned. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. That was you. Not me personally, but I arranged it. Vanessa folded her arms. I needed Serafina vulnerable, grateful, desperate for someone to save her. And I needed you to feel like a hero. So I orchestrated a moment where you could be one. Serafina's face had gone completely white. The men who attacked the restaurant were paid professionals, Vanessa finished, with orders to terrorize everyone but kill no one important. Just enough chaos to make sure Damian would play the night. She paused. The waiter who died was unfortunate, collateral damage, but necessary for authenticity. Damian felt bile rise in his throat. Every moment of his marriage, every decision, every betrayal, every moment of love he'd felt, had been engineered by a woman he'd never truly known. Why? Serafina's voice was barely a whisper. Because Lucien Castellano took everything from me, Vanessa said, her voice hardening, and I wanted him to watch his legacy crumble before he died. So I put you in position, let you think you were powerful, let you destroy Damian and take control of the empire. She smiled. And then I waited for the perfect moment to take it all away and leave you with nothing but the knowledge that you were never in control at all. You're insane, Serafina breathed. I'm patient. Vanessa turned to Reeve. Kill them both. Make it look like a murder-suicide. The heartbroken husband who couldn't let go. The wife who finally snapped. Poetic, really. Reeve raised the gun, and Damian did the only thing he could think of. He threw himself at Serafina. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. They hit the floor together, Damian covering Serafina's body with his own, waiting for the pain that would mean he'd been hit. It didn't come. Instead, there was a second gunshot. Then silence. Damian looked up. Reeve was on the ground, blood spreading from his chest, the gun fallen from his hand. And standing in the doorway with a smoking pistol was someone Damian never expected to see again. Torres. The old captain stepped into the room, his face grim, his weapon still trained on Vanessa. Sorry I'm late, boss. Vanessa's composure cracked, just slightly. You were supposed to be in Baltimore. I was. Torres didn't lower his gun. Until I found out what you were planning, turns out loyalty still means something to some of us. How touching. Vanessa's hand moved toward her purse. Torres fired. The bullet hit the wall 6 inches from her head. Don't, he said quietly. Vanessa froze. Damian helped Serafina to her feet. She was shaking, not from fear, but from rage so intense it made her whole body vibrate. You destroyed 15 years of my life, Serafina said, her voice like broken glass. I gave you 15 years of purpose, Vanessa shot back. Without me, you'd still be playing translator in some corporate office. You killed innocent people. I did what needed to be done. Serafina took a step forward. Torres shifted his weight. Ma'am, give me the gun, Serafina said. Torres hesitated. Give me the gun, Torres. Slowly, the old captain reversed his grip and handed over the weapon. Serafina took it with steady hands. She walked toward Vanessa until the barrel was pressed against the other woman's forehead. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. You wanted me to know, Serafina said quietly. You wanted me to understand that everything I built was a lie, that my power was borrowed, that my revenge was manufactured. Her finger rested on the trigger. But here's what you didn't understand. What? I stopped caring about the lie the moment I realized I could make it real. Serafina's voice was cold, empty. You gave me power thinking you could take it back. But power doesn't work that way. Once someone has it, really has it, it doesn't matter how they got it. It's just theirs. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. So shoot me, she whispered. Prove you're not weak. Serafina stared at her, and then she lowered the gun. No. Vanessa blinked. What? Killing you would be mercy. Serafina stepped back. And you don't deserve mercy. You deserve to watch everything you planned fall apart. You deserve to live, knowing that the woman you tried to destroy is the one who decided your fate. She handed the gun back to Torres. Take her to the federal prosecutor. Tell them Vanessa Laurent has been laundering money for international cartels for 15 years. Give them every record, every transaction, every name in her network. Torres nodded. That'll put her away for life. I know. Serafina's smile was colder than anything Damian had ever seen. And every day she spends in a cell, she'll remember that I'm the one who put her there. Not with violence, not with revenge, just with the empire she helped me build. Vanessa's face twisted with rage. You self-righteous! Torres grabbed her arm and dragged her toward the door. Her screaming echoed through the estate until the sound of car doors slamming cut it off. Then silence. Damian and Seraphina stood alone in the ruined study, surrounded by candles and blood and the wreckage of 15 years. You came, Seraphina said quietly. Yeah. You were supposed to stay away. I know. You could have died. I know that too. Serafina turned to look at him, and for the first time since the warehouse, her mask completely shattered. Tears streamed down her face. Not delicate, not pretty. Ugly, raw, devastating tears that came from somewhere so deep inside her that Damian felt his own chest crack open just watching. Everything was fake, she whispered. Everything. My father didn't give me power because he loved me. Vanessa engineered my revenge. Even you. Her voice broke. Even you saving me was just part of someone else's plan. Damian moved toward her slowly. Sarah, don't tell me it's okay. She wrapped her arms around herself. Don't tell me it doesn't matter, because it does. It matters that nothing in my entire life was real. It matters that I'm not even sure who I am without someone pulling strings. Damian stopped in front of her. You're wrong. How? Because the woman who just chose not to kill Vanessa, that was real. His voice was rough. The woman who tore up divorce papers instead of walking away, that was real. The woman who's standing here covered in blood and still trying to figure out how to be better, that's real. Serafina's breath hitched. How do you know? Because I've spent 6 months watching myself become someone different, Damian said. And the only thing that's real is the choice to keep trying. Everything else, power, legacy, revenge, that's just noise. But choosing to be better even when nobody's watching? He reached out carefully, giving her time to pull away. That's the only thing that actually matters. Serafina stared at him. Then she collapsed forward into his arms. And Damian held her while she shook apart, her tears soaking through his shirt, her fingers digging into his back like she was drowning, and he was the only thing keeping her above water. He didn't tell her it would be okay. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He just held her. And that was enough. They left the estate together as the sun started rising over the Atlantic. Torres was waiting by the car, Vanessa locked in the trunk. Reeves' body already called into contacts who'd handle it quietly. What now, ma'am? Torres asked. Serafina looked out at the city spreading below them. The harbor, the industrial districts, the penthouses glittering in early light. Her city, her empire. Built on lies but made real by choice. Now, she said quietly, we burn everything Vanessa touched and rebuild from ash. That'll take years. I know. Torres nodded and got in the car. Serafina turned to Damian. You should go back to your house, she said. This is going to get ugly. I don't want you caught in it. I'm already caught in it. Damian! I'm not leaving. His voice was firm. Not because I think you need me, but because for the first time in my life, I'm choosing to stand beside someone without needing something in return. He paused. And if that means I spend the next year lifting flour sacks and writing letters you don't read, fine. But I'm not running anymore. Serafina looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something that broke Damian's heart and put it back together simultaneously. She took his hand. Not passionately, not dramatically, Just a simple gesture that said, "I see you." They stood there on the cliffs as the sun climbed higher, two people who'd been destroyed and rebuilt and destroyed again, and for the first time in 15 years, they weren't pretending. They were just two broken people choosing to stand beside each other. And somehow that felt like the most real thing either of them had ever done. But behind them, in the city below, phones were already ringing. Alliances were already shifting. And the people who'd helped Vanessa build her conspiracy were realizing that their puppet master had just been arrested. Which meant they had two choices: surrender or finish what she started. And in Blackwater Port, surrender was never really an option. The first attack came 36 hours after Vanessa's arrest. Serafina was in her office reviewing financial records when the building's fire alarm screamed to life. Not the testing kind, the real kind that made your stomach drop and your instincts kick in before your brain caught up. She was on her feet instantly. Torres burst through the door, gun already drawn. "We need to move, now!" "What's happening?" "Explosion in the parking garage, 3 levels down, structural damage." Torres grabbed her arm. "They're trying to bring the whole building down with you in it." Serafina's mind worked fast, calculating possibilities, and came to one terrifying conclusion. This wasn't about territory or money anymore. This was extermination. They ran. The corridor was already filling with smoke. Emergency lights flashed red against gray walls. Other tenants poured from their offices, panicked, shoving toward the stairwells. Torres kept Serafina close, his body between her and the crowd, one hand on his weapon. They made it to the stairwell, started descending. Then the second explosion hit. The entire building shook. Serafina grabbed the railing as the stairs beneath her feet buckled and twisted. Somewhere above them, glass shattered. Steel groaned. People screamed. Torres pulled her through a doorway onto the 15th floor just as the stairwell behind them collapsed inward with a sound like the world ending. They stood in the corridor breathing hard, surrounded by dust and darkness. "The other stairwell," Serafina said. "Probably the same." "Then we're trapped." Torres checked his phone. No signal. The building's infrastructure was compromised. He looked at Serafina, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Fear. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "if we don't move in the next 5 minutes, this entire floor is coming down." Serafina's pulse hammered in her ears, but her voice stayed steady. "Then we move." They ran toward the emergency exits on the north side, weaving through abandoned offices and overturned furniture. The smoke was getting thicker, harder to breathe. Serafina pulled her jacket over her mouth and kept moving. Behind them, another section of the building collapsed. They burst through a fire door onto an exterior maintenance platform, a narrow metal walkway clinging to the side of the building 15 stories above the street. Wind tore at them. Below, emergency vehicles gathered like toys, their sirens distant and useless. Torres looked left, then right. There. He pointed to a window washing rig suspended 30 feet away. "If we can reach it, we can rappel down," Serafina finished. They moved along the platform, hands gripping the railing, the metal groaning beneath their weight. Halfway across, Serafina heard something that made her blood freeze. Footsteps. Behind them. She turned. 3 men emerged from the smoke, all wearing tactical gear, all carrying weapons that weren't meant for warning shots. Torres raised his gun. "Don't move." The lead man, Taswolz, tall, scarred, with eyes like dead fish, smiled. "Marcus sends his regards." Then he opened fire. Torres shoved Serafina down and returned fire, the sound deafening in the open air. Bullets sparked off metal. One of the attackers dropped. The other 2 scattered for cover. "Go," Torres shouted. "I'm not leaving you." "That's an order." Serafina looked at him. This man who'd followed Damian for years, who'd switched loyalty to her without hesitation, who was about to die so she could live, and made a decision she'd hate herself for later. She ran. The window washing rig was 20 feet away. 15. 10. Behind her, gunfire continued in short, brutal bursts. She reached the rig, grabbed the cables, and started lowering herself just as the maintenance platform exploded. The shockwave threw her sideways. Her grip slipped. For one horrible second, she was falling, the street rushing up to meet her, and then the cable caught and she slammed against the side of the building hard enough to crack ribs. Pain exploded through her chest. She hung there, gasping, vision blurring. Above, the platform was gone. Torres was gone. Everything was smoke and fire and collapsing steel. Serafina forced herself to move, hand over hand down the cable, each breath agony, until her feet finally hit the ground and emergency responders swarmed around her. Someone wrapped a blanket over her shoulders. Someone else tried to guide her toward an ambulance. She shoved them away. "My phone," she gasped. "I need my phone." A paramedic handed her a cell retrieved from her jacket pocket, miraculously intact. Serafina dialed with shaking hands. 3 rings. "Sarah?" Damian's voice, panicked, raw. "I'm alive," she said. "I saw the news. Jesus Christ, I saw... They tried to kill me." Her voice cracked. "Torres is dead. The building's gone. They're not stopping, Damian. Vanessa's people are burning everything." "Where are you?" "Downtown. Emergency services." "Stay there. I'm coming." "No." Serafina straightened despite the pain. "Go to the bakery. Get Mrs. Oakes out of town. They know about you. They know about everyone connected to me. They're going to kill everyone I care about until I'm alone." "Then let them come." "Damian, I'm not running." His voice was steel. "And neither are you. We end this tonight." The line went dead. Serafina stood there, surrounded by chaos, sirens, smoke, the ruins of the building she'd commanded from like a throne, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not fear, fury, cold, calculated, absolute. Vanessa wanted a war? She'd get one. What? By nightfall, the city knew. News of the attack spread through Blackwater Port's underworld like wildfire. Seraphina Vale, Castellano's daughter, the woman who'd taken an empire by force, had been targeted in broad daylight. Her building destroyed, her security team decimated, and she'd survived. The question everyone was asking, what happens next? Serafina answered that question by calling a meeting. Not in a secure location, not in some hidden warehouse or underground bunker, in the ruins of her father's old social club, a burned-out shell in the historic district that had been abandoned for years. The place where Lucian Castellano used to hold court before his empire grew too large for one room. The message was clear: this ends where it began. Word went out through every remaining channel. Every captain, every supplier, every politician still standing. 6 p.m. Come alone. Come unarmed. Come face the woman you tried to kill. Damian arrived first. He found Serafina standing in the center of the ruined club, surrounded by broken furniture and charred walls, wearing a black coat over clothes still dirty from the explosion. Her face was pale, her ribs were wrapped, but her eyes were burning. "You shouldn't be here," she said without turning around. "Neither should you." Damian walked closer. "You need a hospital. I need answers." Serafina finally looked at him. "Torres died protecting me. So did 6 other people in that building. Civilians. Office workers who had nothing to do with any of this." Her voice was quiet, deadly. "Someone's going to pay for that." "Who?" "Everyone who stayed silent." She gestured around the empty club. "Everyone who knew Vanessa was planning something and said nothing. Everyone who thought they could wait and see who won before picking a side." "Sarah, you can't..." "Can't what? Can't demand loyalty? Can't execute traitors?" Her laugh was bitter. "That's what my father would have done. That's what every boss in this city's history has done. You eliminate threats. And you think that makes you stronger? I think it makes me feared." "Fear isn't the same as respect." Serafina turned to face him fully. "No," she said quietly. "But right now, I don't give a damn about respect. I want them to know that attacking me costs everything. I want them to understand that I'm not the quiet girl anymore. I'm not the woman who can be manipulated or controlled or eliminated." Her voice dropped. "I'm the monster they created. And now they're going to live with it." Damian stared at her, and for the first time since the coastal house, he saw the truth. Serafina was breaking, not from weakness, from the weight of trying to be strong alone for too long. He moved closer until he was standing directly in front of her. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "Yes, I do." "No." His voice was firm. "You've been alone your entire life, pretending for your father, pretending for me, pretending for a city that never saw you. But you're not pretending anymore. and you don't have to carry this by yourself. Serafina's jaw tightened. If I show weakness, this isn't weakness. Damian reached out carefully and took her hand. This is the only strength that actually matters. Letting someone stand beside you, not behind you, not in front of you, beside. Her breath hitched. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. He squeezed her hand. So we learned together. For a moment, Seraphina looked like she might cry again. Then footsteps echoed through the ruins. They both turned. People were arriving. Within an hour, the club was filled. Not everyone came. Some were too afraid, some were too smart. But enough showed. Captains, suppliers, old allies of Lucian's who'd stayed neutral during the transition. They stood in loose clusters, wary, watching Seraphina like she was a bomb that might detonate. She let them wait. Let the silence build until it was suffocating. Then she spoke. 15 hours ago, someone tried to kill me. Her voice carried through the ruined space. They used explosives, professional tactics, inside information about my schedule and security, which means someone in this room either helped plan it or knew it was coming. Nobody moved. I'm going to give you one chance, Serafina continued. One. Tell me who knew. Tell me who helped, and I'll make it quick. Silence. She waited. Still nothing. Fine. Serafina's expression went cold. Then we do this the hard way. She nodded once. The doors slammed shut. Men appeared from the shadows. What remained of her security team, supplemented by loyalists Torres had personally vetted before he died. They moved through the crowd, separating people, forcing them against walls. Panic rippled through the room. What is this? Someone shouted. This, Serafina said quietly, is a reckoning. She walked through the crowd slowly, studying faces, reading fear. And then she stopped in front of a man Damian recognized. Vincent Caruso, one of the old guard, a captain who'd served under Lucian for 30 years and had supposedly retired after the transition. Vincent, Serafina said, you weren't at the meeting when I took over. You sent your son instead. Caruso's face was stone. I was sick. You were hedging your bets. Serafina tilted her head, waiting to see if I'd survive. And when Vanessa made her move, you gave her access to building schematics, security rotations, blind spots. That's a lie. Is it? Serafina pulled out her phone and held up a photo. That's you, 3 days ago, meeting with Marcus Reeve in a parking garage downtown. Caruso's face drained of color. I didn't know what he was planning. You knew enough. Serafina's voice was ice. You knew enough to stay away from the building yesterday. You knew enough to move your assets offshore. You knew enough to position yourself to take over after I was dead. Serafina, please. Torres is dead because of you. Her voice cracked, just slightly. Good men are dead because you decided your ambition was worth more than their lives. Caruso looked around desperately. I'm not the only one. Half this room knew something was wrong. You can't kill all of us. Can I? The room went silent, and Damian saw it happen in real time. Serafina standing on the edge of a decision that would define everything she became next. She could execute Caruso. Make an example. Rule through fear and brutality the way her father had. Or she could choose something different. He stepped forward. Sarah. She looked at him. Don't become them, he said quietly. They tried to kill me. I know. They murdered innocent people. I know that too. He moved closer. But if you execute him here, in front of everyone, you're not proving you're strong. You're proving Vanessa was right. That you're just another puppet, another version of violence wearing a different face. Then what do I do? Damian looked at Caruso, this old man shaking with fear, and then back at Serafina. You make him irrelevant, Damian said. Strip his assets, exile him. Let him live knowing he had power and lost it because he was too weak to stand behind you when it mattered. He paused. Let everyone in this room see that mercy is a choice you make from strength, not weakness. Serafina stared at him, then at Caruso, then at the room full of people watching to see who she really was. She made her decision. Vincent Caruso, she said clearly. As of this moment, everything you own is seized. Every account, every property, every connection. You have 24 hours to leave Blackwater Port. If you're still here after that, I'll let Torres's family decide your fate. She turned to face the crowd. That goes for anyone else who stayed silent. You had a choice. You chose wrong. Now you live with the consequences. She walked toward the exit. Damian followed. Behind them, chaos erupted. Shouting, accusations, people trying to explain or defend or escape. Serafina didn't look back. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. She leaned against a wall, breathing hard, her ribs screaming. Did I do the right thing? She asked quietly. I don't know, Damian said honestly, but you did the thing that lets you sleep at night, and that matters. Serafina closed her eyes. This isn't over. No. Vanessa's still out there. Even in custody, she has reach, resources, people we haven't identified yet. She opened her eyes. They're going to come again. Let them. She looked at him. You're not afraid? Terrified. Damian's smile was grim. But I've spent 6 months learning how to be afraid and keep moving anyway. So whatever comes next, we face it together. Serafina studied his face for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised them both. She kissed him. Not desperate, not passionate, just tired, honest, real. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. If we die tomorrow, we're not dying tomorrow. But if we do, she continued, I need you to know that the man standing here, the one who spent 6 months lifting flour sacks and writing letters and choosing to stay even when he had a way out, that's the man I fell in love with 15 years ago. Not the empire, not the power, just you. Damian's throat tightened. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out, annoyed, ready to ignore it. Then he saw the message, and his blood turned to ice. What? Serafina asked. Damian showed her the screen, a single photo. Mrs. Oakes, tied to a chair in what looked like a warehouse. Blood on her face. Terror in her eyes. Beneath the image, a text. You took everything from me. Now I take everything from you. Come alone to Pier 7. Midnight. Or she dies screaming. No signature. But they both knew who sent it. Marcus Reeve. Somehow, impossibly, he'd survived the estate. And now he had leverage. Serafina looked at Damian, and they both understood. This was it. The final confrontation. No more planning, no more mercy, no more chances. Just blood and fire, and the choice between saving someone innocent or walking into a trap that would kill them both. We call for backup, Serafina said. There's no time. Then we don't go. She'll die. You'll die. Damian looked at her. 6 months ago, I would have let her die to save myself, he said quietly. But I'm not that man anymore. And if I don't go, if I let an innocent woman die because I'm too afraid to face consequences, then everything I've been trying to become was a lie. Serafina grabbed his arm. This is suicide. Probably. Damian, I have to go. His voice was steady. Not because I'm a hero, but because this is the choice that defines whether I'm actually different or just pretending. He paused. You taught me that. Serafina's hands were shaking. Then I'm coming with you. No. Yes. Sarah, if we both die, then we die together. Her eyes blazed. I'm not losing you again. Not now. Not like this. They stood there in the darkness, two people who'd destroyed each other and rebuilt something fragile from the wreckage, and made the decision that would either save them or end them, together. Always together. Damian checked his watch. 11:07 p.m. 53 minutes until midnight. He looked at Serafina. If this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, then we make sure it costs them everything. They got in the car and drove toward Pier 7 like soldiers heading to a war they knew they couldn't win. But sometimes winning wasn't the point. Sometimes survival was enough. Sometimes just refusing to run was the only victory that mattered. The city blurred past them. Lights, streets, memories of everything they'd built and destroyed. And somewhere ahead, in a warehouse by the water, Marcus Reeve was waiting with a gun and a grudge, and the certainty that tonight someone's story would finally end. The question was whose. Pier 7 sat at the edge of the industrial harbor like a monument to everything Blackwater Port used to be. Rusted cranes, warehouses with broken windows, Shipping containers stacked like coffins waiting to be filled. The water beyond was black and restless, reflecting nothing but darkness. Damian parked 3 blocks away. He and Serafina approached on foot, moving through shadows, their breath visible in the cold air. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said in the silence between them. The warehouse loomed ahead. Warehouse 17, the same place where this had all started months ago. Where Serafina had stood with her father's army and torn Damian's world apart. Now they were returning together, and the symmetry felt like destiny or a curse or both. Serafina checked her weapon, a small pistol Torres had given her years ago. 6 rounds. She'd never fired it outside a range. Damian had nothing. "Stay behind me," she said quietly. "No." "Damian, we do this together or not at all." She looked at him, and in the dim light from distant street lamps he saw fear and determination and something else he couldn't name. "If this goes wrong," she whispered, "if I don't make it out, you will. But if I don't, promise me something." "What?" "That you'll become the man you've been trying to be. Not for me, for yourself." Her voice cracked. "Promise me you won't go back to what you were." Damian pulled her close, pressed his forehead against hers. "I promise." They held each other for 3 heartbeats. Then they walked toward the warehouse. The main door was open, not kicked in, not forced, just open, like an invitation to a funeral. Inside, the warehouse was lit by portable work lights scattered across the concrete floor. Long shadows stretched between shipping crates. The ceiling was lost in darkness 30 feet overhead. And in the center of it all, tied to a metal chair, was Mrs. Oakes. She was alive, bruised, terrified, duct tape across her mouth. Her eyes went wide when she saw Damian, and she tried to scream something through the gag. A warning. Damian started forward. Serafina grabbed his arm. "Wait! She's right there. It's too easy." And she was right. Because a second later, Marcus Reeves stepped out from behind a shipping container with a gun pointed directly at Mrs. Oakes' head. He looked worse than the last time they'd seen him. Blood stained his shirt from where Torres had shot him. His face was pale, sweating, but his eyes were clear and filled with something that looked like madness wearing a suit. "You came," Reeves said. "Both of you. How romantic." "Let her go," Damian said. "No. She has nothing to do with this." "Neither did I." Reeves' voice was bitter. "I was loyal. I did everything Vanessa asked. I played my part perfectly. And then you both survived, and suddenly I'm the loose end that needs cutting." He laughed, sharp, jagged. "You know what the worst part is? I actually believed her when she said we'd rule together. I actually thought I mattered." Serafina took a careful step forward. "Marcus, listen to me. Don't." He pressed the gun harder against Mrs. Oakes' temple. "Don't talk to me like I'm one of your assets, like I'm something you can manage or manipulate. I'm done being used by people who think they're smarter than me." "Then what do you want?" Serafina asked. "I want you to hurt the way I hurt." Reeves' hand was shaking. "I want you to watch someone innocent die because of choices you made. I want you to carry that weight for the rest of your miserable life. Killing her doesn't change anything. It changes everything." Reeves' finger moved to the trigger. "It proves that power is just an illusion, that no matter how much control you think you have, there's always someone willing to burn it all down just to watch you bleed." Damian's mind was racing, calculating angles, distances, possibilities. Reeve was 12 feet away. Mrs. Oakes was directly in the line of fire. Serafina had her weapon, but no clean shot. If they moved wrong, the old woman died. "Marcus," Damian said, his voice steady, "you're right." Reeves' eyes snapped to him. "What?" "You're right. We used people, destroyed lives, built empires on the backs of men like you who did the work while we took the credit." Damian took a step forward. "I did it for years, and it cost me everything that mattered." "Damian, don't!" Serafina started. He kept moving. "But here's the thing, Marcus," Damian continued. "Pulling that trigger doesn't make you powerful. Just makes you the same as us. Another person choosing violence because it's easier than change." "I don't want to change," Reeves spat. "I want revenge." "Then shoot me." Damian was 6 feet away now. "I'm the one who built the empire you helped destroy. I'm the one who never saw you as anything but a tool. So if you want revenge, take it. but leave her out of it. Reeves stared at him. Then he moved the gun, pointed it at Damian's chest. You think you're a hero now? Reeves' voice was shaking. You think 6 months of playing Baker makes up for 15 years of being a monster? No? Damian stopped moving. I think I'm just a man trying to be better and failing most of the time, but at least I'm trying. What are you doing, Marcus? What does this prove? It proves I'm not weak. No. Damian's voice dropped. It proves you're so desperate to matter that you'll kill an innocent woman just to be remembered. That's not strength. That's the most pathetic thing I've ever heard. Reeves' face twisted, and Damian saw it, the moment when rage overrode survival instinct. Reeves' finger tightened on the trigger. 3 things happened simultaneously. Damian threw himself sideways, Serafina fired, and Mrs. Oakes kicked backward with everything she had, the chair slamming into Reeves' legs. The gunshot was deafening. Damian hit the concrete hard, rolled, felt fire tear through his shoulder. Blood bloomed across his shirt. Pain exploded through his nervous system. But he was alive. Reeve wasn't. Serafina's shot had caught him in the throat. He dropped the gun, grabbed at his neck, blood pouring between his fingers. His eyes were wide, shocked, like he couldn't believe this was how it ended. He fell. Serafina was already moving, kicking Reeves' gun away, dropping to her knees beside Mrs. Oakes. Are you hurt? Can you breathe? The old woman nodded frantically. Serafina tore the tape off her mouth. Mrs. Oakes gasped, coughed, and then looked past Serafina to where Damian was struggling to sit up. You damn fool, she wheezed, walking toward a loaded gun. Damian laughed, which hurt like hell. Yeah, he managed. I'm still working on the self-preservation thing. Serafina cut Mrs. Oakes's restraints with a knife from Reeves' belt, then moved to Damian. Let me see. He pulled his hand away from the wound. Blood was flowing steady but not spurting. Through and through, clean. I'll live, he said. You better. Serafina was already pulling off her jacket, wadding it against the wound. Because if you die after all this, I'm going to kill you. That doesn't make sense. Nothing about us makes sense. She pressed down hard on the wound. Damian hissed through his teeth. Behind them, Reeve made a wet, choking sound. They both turned. He was still alive. Barely. His eyes found Serafina's, and something like understanding passed between them. Vanessa, he gurgled. She's not done. What do you mean? Serafina moved closer. Contingency. Blood bubbled at his lips. If she's arrested, everything goes public, every deal, every name, everyone you protected. He smiled with red teeth. You can't bury all of it. Who has the files? Reeves' eyes started to glaze. Who, Marcus? But he was already gone. His body went slack. The light left his eyes. And whatever secrets he'd been holding died with him. Serafina sat back, breathing hard. We need to move, she said. If what he said is true, it probably is. Damian was on his feet now, swaying slightly. Vanessa's too smart to not have insurance. Then we have maybe 24 hours before every federal agency on the East Coast comes down on us. Mrs. Oakes cleared her throat. They both looked at her. She was standing now, rubbing her wrists, looking at them with an expression somewhere between exhausted and exasperated. You two, she said slowly, have the most complicated relationship I've ever seen. Despite everything, the blood, the bodies, the imminent collapse of everything they'd built, Damian started laughing. Then Serafina started laughing. And for a moment, in that warehouse full of death and consequences, they laughed until tears streamed down their faces, because what else could you do when your life had become this insane? Mrs. Oakes watched them with the patience of someone who'd seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. You done? She asked. They nodded, wiping their eyes. Good. She picked up her purse from where it had been thrown beside the chair. Then get me the hell out of this city. I've had enough excitement for one lifetime. They drove Mrs. Oakes to a safe house 3 states away, a contact of Serafina's who owed favors and didn't ask questions. By the time they made the drive back to Blackwater Port, the sun was rising over the Atlantic, painting the sky in colors that didn't match the mood. Damian's shoulder was bandaged professionally now. Serafina had found a doctor who worked off the books. It would heal. Everything would heal eventually. except the choices. Those stayed with you forever. They parked outside the ruins of Serafina's office building, now just a skeleton of steel and shattered glass surrounded by construction barriers and federal investigators. "We can't go back there," Serafina said. "I know. Everything I built is about to come crashing down." "I know." She turned to look at him. "I should have signed those divorce papers," she said quietly. "Should have let you walk away clean before all this." "Probably. But I didn't." "No." "Why not?" Damian thought about that for a long time. "Because," he said finally, "walking away would have been easier, and I'm done choosing easy." Serafina's eyes were wet. "What do we do now?" "We disappear." Damian reached for her hand. "Both of us. We take what we can carry, leave the rest, and start over somewhere nobody knows our names." "I've never been nobody." "Neither have I." He smiled. "Might be nice." She looked at the ruins of her empire. "All those years," she whispered, "all that power, and it was just smoke." "No." Damian squeezed her hand. "The power was real, but it was never the point. The point was figuring out who you are when you strip away everything else." "And who am I?" "I don't know." He turned to face her fully. "But I'd like to find out, if you'll let me." Serafina stared at him, this man who'd destroyed her, rebuilt himself, and chosen to stand beside her when any sane person would have run, and made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff with no idea what was below. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Let's disappear." They sat there in the car as the sun climbed higher, watching the city wake up around them, and started making plans that felt impossible and terrifying and more honest than anything they'd done in 15 years. 3 months later. The house was small. 2 bedrooms. A kitchen with appliances that had seen better decades. A backyard with a lemon tree that was finally producing fruit after years of neglect. It sat on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. Not the Atlantic anymore. A different ocean entirely, where nobody knew their names or their history. Damian woke early. He made coffee. Stood on the back porch watching fog roll across the water. Listened to gulls and waves and the silence of a life that didn't require violence. Inside, Serafina was still sleeping. She'd been having nightmares less frequently. The shadows under her eyes were fading. She'd cut her hair short, stopped wearing makeup, started looking like someone he was meeting for the first time. They both were. Every morning felt like learning how to be human again. Some days were good. They'd walk along the beach, cook simple meals, talk about nothing important, watch the sunset like people who'd earned peace. Other days were hard. The nightmares would come back. The news would report something from Blackwater Port, another arrest, another revelation from Vanessa's files, and they'd be reminded that their past was still out there, still consequences they'd never fully escape. But they were facing it together. Not as boss and wife, not as empire and legacy, just as 2 broken people trying to build something real from the wreckage. Damian heard footsteps behind him. Serafina emerged onto the porch wearing one of his old shirts, her hair messy from sleep, holding her own cup of coffee. She stood beside him without speaking. They watched the ocean together. "I got a letter yesterday," she said finally. "From?" "The federal prosecutor. Vanessa's trial starts next month." Serafina took a sip of coffee. "They want me to testify." Damian's chest tightened. "Are you going to?" "I don't know." She paused. "Part of me wants to face her. Let her see that she didn't destroy me, that I survived everything she threw at me and came out the other side." "And the other part?" "The other part wants to never see her face again. Wants to let her rot in prison without giving her the satisfaction of knowing she still matters to me." Damian nodded slowly. "What do you think I should do?" Serafina asked. "I think you should do whatever lets you sleep at night," he said. "Not for revenge, not for closure, just for you." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" 6 months of lifting flour sacks, he smiled. "Does something to your perspective." They stood there in comfortable silence until Serafina spoke again. "Do you miss it?" "What?" "The power, the empire, the feeling of walking into a room and watching people fall silent." Damian thought about that honestly. "Sometimes," he admitted, But then I remember what that power cost. And I remember that the only time I felt like myself was when I had nothing left to lose. He turned to look at her. This version of me is smaller, quieter, less impressive to the world. But it's the first time in my life I felt real. Serafina's eyes were wet. I love you, she whispered. The words hung in the morning air like something sacred. Damian's throat tightened. I know, he said, and I spent 15 years not understanding what that meant, not protecting it, not honoring it. And now? Now I know that love isn't ownership or control or grand gestures. His voice was rough. It's just choosing every day to stand beside someone, even when it's hard, especially then. Serafina set down her coffee cup and turned to face him fully. The man I married was a stranger I was trying to save, she said. The man standing here. The one who took a bullet for an old woman he barely knew, who drove 3 states to keep her safe, who gave up everything to become someone different. That's the man I choose. I'm still figuring it out, Damian said. Still making mistakes. So am I. She smiled. Small, fragile, honest. Maybe we figure it out together. Damian pulled her close. And they stood there on that porch overlooking a different ocean in a different life. 2 people who destroyed each other and somehow found a way back. And for the first time in either of their lives, it felt like enough. Not perfect. Not healed. Just enough. Six months after that, Serafina did testify. She flew back to Blackwater Port, walked into that courtroom, and looked Vanessa Laurent in the eyes while describing exactly how she'd been manipulated, used, and nearly destroyed. Vanessa stared back with that same cold smile. But when Serafina was finished, when she'd laid out every piece of evidence, every betrayal, every life Vanessa had ruined, something shifted in the other woman's expression. Not regret, not guilt, recognition. That Serafina had survived, had chosen mercy over vengeance, had walked away from power to find something more valuable. And Vanessa, for all her planning and manipulation and brilliance, had ended up exactly where she'd always been destined to end. Alone. The verdict came back 3 days later. Guilty on all counts. Life in federal prison without possibility of parole. Serafina watched the bailiffs take Vanessa away and felt nothing but exhausted relief. It was over. Not perfectly. Not completely. There would always be threads, loose ends, people who remembered what she'd been and what she'd done. But the story had ended, and she could finally start writing a new one. Mix. 2 years later. The bakery was small. Just a storefront on a quiet street in a coastal town nobody had heard of. The sign above the door said Vale and Oaks in simple letters. Inside, the smell of fresh bread filled the air every morning. Damian worked the ovens. Mrs. Oaks managed the front, and Serafina, who'd spent 15 years commanding empires, learned how to make pastries that made people smile. It was honest work, hard work, the kind that left you exhausted at the end of the day, but satisfied in a way that money and power never had. They lived in the house on the cliff. They walked on the beach most evenings. They talked about the future in terms of seasons instead of territories. And slowly, imperceptibly, they became the people they'd always had the potential to be. Not heroes, not villains, just people. Flawed, complicated, trying their best. One afternoon, while Serafina was closing up the bakery, a young woman came in. She couldn't have been more than 25, with nervous eyes and a question that came out too fast. Are you Seraphina Vale? Serafina's blood went cold, but she kept her voice steady. Who's asking? My name is Elena Caruso. The young woman swallowed hard. Vincent Caruso was my grandfather. The name hit like a fist. The man Serafina had exiled, the one who'd helped Vanessa plan her assassination. I know, Serafina said carefully. He died 6 months ago, Elena continued. Heart attack. But before he died, he wrote letters to everyone he'd wronged, and there was one for you. She pulled an envelope from her bag. He made me promise to deliver it. Serafina took the envelope with shaking hands. Elena nodded once and left. Serafina stood there alone in the empty bakery, holding a letter from a dead man, and almost threw it away without reading. But curiosity won. She opened it. The handwriting was shaky, old but legible. Serafina, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Good. I don't deserve to face you after what I did. I spent my whole life believing power was the only thing that mattered, that loyalty was weakness, that mercy was for people too stupid to take what they could. You taught me I was wrong. When you exiled me instead of killing me, I thought you were weak, thought I'd gotten away with something. But living with the weight of knowing I'd betrayed you, knowing I'd chosen ambition over honor, that was worse than any bullet. I died alone. My family barely spoke to me. My friends were ghosts. Everything I built meant nothing because I'd built it on betrayal. You gave me mercy, and I wasted it. Don't waste yours. Whatever life you've built away from Blackwater Port, protect it. Not with violence or power or fear. Protect it by being the kind of person who deserves it. You did something I never could. You walked away from everything to become someone better. That's the only kind of strength that matters. Vincent Serafina read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and slipped it into her pocket. When Damian came to pick her up, she was standing outside the bakery watching the sunset. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah." She turned to look at him. "I am." "What happened?" She told him about the letter, about Vincent Caruso, about mercy and consequences, and the strange way the past kept reaching forward. Damian listened without interrupting. When she finished, he took her hand. "You think he meant it?" Damian asked. "I think he died wishing he'd meant it sooner." Serafina squeezed his hand. "But yeah, I think at the end he finally understood." They walked toward the car together. "Do you ever wonder," Damian said quietly, "if we're just running away? If this life is real or just another version of hiding?" Serafina stopped walking. She looked at the bakery behind them, the street, the ordinary people living ordinary lives, the ocean in the distance and the sky turning colors that didn't care about empires or power or any of the things they'd once thought defined them. "I used to think running away meant weakness," she said. "But now I think choosing to leave something that's destroying you. That's the bravest thing you can do. Even if people think you're a coward, especially then." She turned to face him. "Because the only opinion that matters is the one you have of yourself when you're alone in the dark. And for the first time in my life, I don't hate the person I see." Damian pulled her close. "Me neither," he whispered. They stood there in the fading light, two people who'd been monsters and victims and survivors and everything in between, and chose to believe that change was possible. Not easy, not immediate, but possible. And that was enough. 5 years later. The call came on a Tuesday. Damian was pruning the lemon tree when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Hello? Is this Damian Vale?" Male voice, professional, unfamiliar. "Who's asking?" "My name is Detective Chen. I'm calling from Blackwater Port." A pause. "I'm investigating some cold cases related to the Castellano organization. I was hoping you might be willing to answer some questions." Damian's heart kicked against his ribs. "I don't know anything about that anymore." "I understand you've moved on," Chen said carefully, "and I'm not looking to cause trouble. But there are families who deserve closure, people who disappeared during that time. I was hoping you might help." Damian looked toward the house where Serafina was reading on the porch. "What kind of questions?" "Just background, context. You're not under investigation. I just want to understand how things worked back then." Chen paused. "A lot of bad people went to prison because of you and Ms. Vale. I'm trying to make sure the rest of them don't slip through the cracks." Damian thought about that, about Torres, about the people who died because he'd been too blind or too arrogant or too selfish to protect them. "I'll talk," he said finally, "but not on the phone, and not in Blackwater Port." "Where?" "I'll come to you, neutral ground, one conversation, then I'm done." "Fair enough." They arranged a meeting. When Damian hung up, Serafina was standing beside him. "What was that?" she asked. He told her. She was quiet for a long time. "You don't have to go," she said finally. "I know. It could open old wounds." "It probably will." Damian looked at her. "But maybe some wounds need to be opened. Maybe closure isn't just for us." Serafina studied his face. Then she nodded. I'm coming with you. You don't... Together, she interrupted. We do this together. That's what we agreed. Damian smiled. Yeah, that's what we agreed. The meeting happened in a coffee shop 2 states away. Detective Chen was younger than Damian expected. Maybe 40. Tired eyes. The kind of cop who actually cared. They talked for 3 hours. Damian and Serafina told him everything they could remember. Names, locations, patterns, connections. Not to protect themselves. They'd already accepted whatever consequences were coming, but to give closure to people who deserved it. Chen took notes carefully. When they finished, he closed his notebook and looked at them both. Can I ask you something personal? He said. Depends on the question, Serafina replied. How do you live with it? Chen's voice was quiet. Knowing the things you did, the lives you destroyed. How do you just move on? Damian and Serafina exchanged glances. You don't, Damian said finally. You don't move on. You don't forget. You just carry it. He paused. But you can choose what you do with that weight. You can let it crush you, or you can let it remind you why you changed. And that's enough? Chen asked. No. Serafina's voice was honest. It's never enough, but it's all we have. Chen nodded slowly. He stood, shook their hands, and left. Damian and Serafina sat alone in the coffee shop for a while after that, processing the conversation and feeling like they'd just closed a door that had been open for years. Not forgotten, just closed. You ready to go home? Damian asked. Serafina smiled, small, tired, real. Yeah, let's go home. 10 years later. The funeral was small. Mrs. Oakes had lived to 93. She'd gone peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family and the people who'd loved her. The service was quiet, respectful, full of stories about a woman who'd spent her life baking bread and helping strangers. Damian and Serafina sat in the back row. They'd never told anyone about the night in the warehouse, about how Mrs. Oakes had been caught in the crossfire of a war that wasn't hers. She'd never talked about it either. Just went back to her life, moved west with them, and spent her final years making pastries and telling stories about the old country. During the eulogy, her grandson, a man in his 40s who'd taken over the bakery, mentioned that his grandmother always said the same thing about life. She used to tell me, he said, voice thick with emotion, that people aren't defined by their worst moment. They're defined by what they do after. Damian felt Serafina's hand slip into his. After the service, they walked through the cemetery together. Their steps were slower now. Their hair was graying. They'd lived a decade of ordinary days that added up to something extraordinary, simply because they'd chosen to keep trying. Do you think we're better people now? Serafina asked quietly. Damian thought about that. I think we're different people, he said. Whether that's better, I don't know. But we're honest. We're trying, and we're not hurting anyone anymore. He paused. Maybe that's the best any of us can hope for. Not redemption? I don't believe in redemption. Damian stopped walking. I believe in choice. Every day, every moment, choosing to be someone you can live with. Serafina looked at him. This man who'd destroyed her and rebuilt her and stood beside her through everything, and realized they'd spent more years healing together than they'd ever spent hurting each other. That was something. Maybe it was everything. I love you, she said. I know. He smiled. But I never get tired of hearing it. They kept walking. Behind them, the sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in colors that promised nothing except another day, another choice, another chance to be better than yesterday. And for two people who'd once thought power was the only thing worth having, that simple promise felt like grace they didn't deserve, but had somehow been given anyway. Years would pass. They'd grow old together in that house on the cliff. The bakery would thrive. The past would fade, but never disappear. And on quiet mornings when the fog rolled in and the world felt new, they'd stand on their porch with coffee and silence and the knowledge that they'd survived everything meant to destroy them. Not because they were strong, not because they were heroes, but because they'd chosen each other. Every single day, even when it was hard, especially then. And in the end, that choice was the only power that ever really mattered, The kind you carried in your chest instead of your hands. The kind that couldn't be taken or destroyed or manipulated. The kind that was just yours, real, honest, earned. And when they were old and tired and ready for the story to end, they'd face that ending together too. Not with fear, not with regret, just with the quiet certainty that they'd done the one thing most people never manage. They'd changed. And that change, small and imperfect and hard-won, was the only legacy worth leaving behind. The end.